Welcome to AM Best Audio.
Welcome to the IMCA and AM Best Insurance Marketing Leader Lunch webinar. I'm Lori Chortis with AM Best. And joining me today is my co-host, Dave Evans. He's a senior associate at Artrike and an Insurance Marketing and Communications Association CMO Council member. Dave, welcome. So great to see you.
Great to be here, Lori. Thank you.
In this program series, we dig into insurance marketing with top marketing leaders of noteworthy insurance organizations. Today, our guests are Satvinder Kaur, a digital, artificial intelligence, and marketing consultant, and Jeff Baer, former head of independent agent marketing and distribution at Foremost Insurance, and formerly the company's spokesperson on social media under the moniker the Foremost Insurance Guy. Satvinder and Jeff, welcome. So great to see you both. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
During this presentation, we may mention the subject of financial strength ratings. A full explanation of AM Best ratings is available online at ambest.com/terms. The opinions expressed by our panelists are theirs and theirs alone, and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of AM Best. And we'd like to invite all of you to join in today's conversation by using the Q&A tab in the player. I'll kick off today's discussion. Satvinder, we'll begin with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and career in insurance and marketing?
Sure. First of all, I'm very glad to be here. Some conversations initially just were great. So 2 decades in insurance industry. How I landed, it was not by choice, it happened, but I was fascinated by the industry since day one. I totally enjoy what I learned here, and it's quite challenging because it's a hard nut to crack when you are selling insurance. And when I say selling, I do believe that marketing and sales, they work so collectively, and that's how my mind work. But my specialization has been digital marketing throughout, when digital word didn't even exist. I have spent about 14 years at AXA XL, and then about 5 at Acrisure, and now I opened my own consultancy where I'm very passionate about digital marketing strategies, but I do have a lot of experience in artificial intelligence and what we could do, how you should apply it, design some workshops around it. I'm pretty excited to share what I know here in my insights.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So glad you're here with us to join.
Thank you.
And Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience as an insurance marketer over the years?
Well, thanks, Lori, and thanks again for the opportunity to visit with you and Dave today, and also the IMCA and AM Best audience. It's interesting, Satvinder said this, didn't get into the insurance industry maybe on purpose. Neither did I, but I started with Foremost in 1978. And I spent quite a bit of time in sales, and I moved into the marketing arena about 20 years ago, and I completed my career as head of marketing and distribution for Foremost in Bristol West. During that time, I worked primarily developing strategies for the organization, but also I worked on developing and creating marketing plans focused on independent agents because of the wide breadth of independent agents Foremost had, but also directing some of our marketing plays for the brand overall directly, and also for one of our customers, AARP.
Wonderful. Well, Satvinder, marketers today are increasingly relying on data. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of data in your marketing strategies and processes?
Absolutely. But I also say, shouldn't they rely on data, right? And it's so amazing because in insurance industry, specifically, you do have data. And this is something which just occurred to me lately. Data-driven marketing versus insights-driven marketing, right? Because data exists. It has always existed. But if you do not use that data to your advantage, I think that's the missing edge. I do feel the processes, I would actually summarize or highlight this in three key things that you need when you're planning your marketing strategies. First of all, marketing strategies now is no more a siloed function. And that's where you need to intentionally have a structure around it where with what teams within your organization you need to have a seat on the table. It's your data organization. If you have an innovation team or somebody who's outsourced to help you think about machine learning, Gen AI, and how other things you could be using, I think you need to think about that structure. The second, obviously, is your processes and processes. When I say process, the process of when would you inform the data teams what you would need for your marketing strategies across the year, and also when you're doing campaign planning? It's not just marketing teams sitting in a room in silo and coming up with planning. And then you do need your infrastructure in place too, right? Because the data cannot just do anything if you don't have the right way of, say, putting the dashboards together using that, or creating some propensity models, etc. And lastly, I feel is mindset. I don't think that using data or deriving insights out of it is function of one person in the organization, in the marketing organization. Everyone has to think about, what can I use that's available to me to make right decisions? That could be your marketing analytics, or that could be data or maybe some studies that your actuaries are creating. But you just need to be aware and have that mindset that I'm going to use the data to make the decision versus just my own experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Jeff, how did data and analytics influence decision-making in your marketing strategies at Foremost Insurance?
Yeah, there's something I think about in this area, but before I jump to that, I want to go back to something Satvender said, because she mentioned the use of dashboards and she mentioned the use of making it prolific across the organization. I think that's incredibly important. We utilize dashboards quite a bit at Foremost, but one of the key elements was exposing it to other areas of the organization. So we were all, if you will, singing from the same hymnal, but we understood what the notes meant too, and what the parts meant, and how the lyrics embodied themselves with the music. That was incredibly important to have that. So I think Satvender makes a really important point there for any organization. But when I think about the question, I'm sure I borrowed this acronym from something I read. I know it's not something I came up with originally, but it always made a lot of sense to me. It was CASE, C-A-S-E. And I think the key attributes of any successful marketer boil down to those elements: creativity, analytics, storytelling, and experience. And so getting back to the second letter in that acronym, A for analytics, our marketing strategies were aimed at agents. They were heavily tied to the core attributes of our business. And I don't think they're unusual from how other insurance companies think about this, but they're primarily the KPIs most companies look at, like loss and expense ratio, combined ratio, retention rates, and growth. But then we also connected deeply with our product partners. So we looked at product-based elements like competitiveness, and we delved deeply into comparative raters to see where we landed in the marketplace when we had that capability. And also working with product on indicated rate changes. So you understood where we were in the market, where the market was going. And those elements really defined where we'd put our marketing dollars in play geographically, but also demographically if we were doing direct marketing. And that was to boost our premium growth like everybody else, but to really focus on areas that had solid returns, right? The first cost of doing business was profit. And then our marketing spend over time, it really moved more into electronic mediums. So we monitored website traffic and bounce rates. I think everyone who's in that space does that. And we made changes to our environments, our website environments, and the way that we connected to them. But we also modified our content. We did a lot of A/B testing, and we did that based on open and click-through rates. Again, traditional metrics that everybody looks at, but also having the ability and the flexibility to go back and forth and make changes on that basis. Then looking back at our direct business, we also spent a really large amount of time looking at our acquisition cost. And we did that as part of our lead generation effort. And then we married that up with an important variable for us, which was customer lifetime value. Which products would they buy? Which products would they hold on to? How could that impact retention and the total household value over time? And that was to ensure that we were building up that portfolio, that really our expectations aligned with the expenditures we had in place.
So interesting. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I'm going to turn our conversation over now to my co-host, Dave.
Thanks, Laurie. So, actually, Savinder, based on what Jeff just said, going back to my publishing days, I'll call it the old school days, I don't know if you ever heard the expression, I know half of my advertising dollars are wasted. I just don't know which half. And
sure did.
Well, and that it gets to the point now. So nowadays, that isn't true, because what would you suggest are the emerging key metrics and ratios that insurance marketers should focus on the line of business and the audience?
Yeah, and that's very interesting. But I would also mention what Jeff, you just mentioned on the direct business, right? I think and this goes to the point of your metrics response too, but I really feel that when you acquire, the cost of acquisition and the LTV, I think those are such important elements that plays out together, because you have acquired a client and then you switch them to retention, advocacy, engaging them. So your metrics changes with that, right? And that's where the LTV comes in play. And you say, okay, I don't have the cost of acquisition, but I have this lower cost of engaging them, right? Which could be via social media articles and whatnot. So with those strategies or tactics, your metrics should change. And I stopped looking at by product, by audience. I have my way of doing marketing strategy has been, you look at your funnel. I still believe funnel does exist. The only change I make in the funnel, and I've just heard so many people saying funnel doesn't exist anymore. I think it does. The funnel exists. The only change in my view is at each phase. So if you look at awareness, consideration, conversion, and then engagement, and then it goes back to awareness, maybe you're selling them something else now. At every stage you have nurture, because you're telling them what else you could be buying. You're not in a ready state to buy right now, but this is what you could be doing. So the way I design, or I did actually design that in my previous organization. I've worked with some CMOs right now as well, which is look at your funnel, at each funnel map tactics, and then define your KPIs. So your conversion, for example, your consideration phase, awareness. Let's talk about awareness first. Someone might just be worried about what are my impressions, how many people have reached out. That's where you stop. You don't need to worry about how many people filled out the form, because now they are at a consideration phase. You look at the CTRs, you look at the form data filled, and I've heard some marketers do say, oh, our job stops here, but it doesn't really, because then you work with the sales organizations and you say, here are your goals. Say you want to sell $2.4 million, I'm just picking a number, of policies using digital business this year. We as marketeer, based on what we have seen in past 2 years, can provide you these many leads based on our budgets. Now, maybe you'll convert 10%, but we need to, now sales team, business development team needs to come up with another strategy to make that 2.4 million mark there. What else we need to do to get to that point, right? So those are the kind of discussions or considerations you should have. But I do feel that mapping your metrics to every stage of the funnel and then measuring the effectiveness based of that is important, because you cannot say that everything is measured by, every stage is measured by the same metric. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. Well,
and thanks, Savinder. It makes a lot of sense. And Jeff, I don't want to put you in the middle of a funnel controversy, but so, from your perspective, what are the challenges facing you when you are interpreting the complex data as Savinder was just describing, and how can they overcome them to effectively communicate with the stakeholder?
So I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to throw myself into the funnel controversy because I think it's fun. I think Seth Vinder's exactly right. And she makes a point that's incredibly important, and I'll leave the funnel conversation aside then. It's the iterative nature of the funnel, right? The funnel has existed for some period of time, and sales organizations still use the funnel as part of their daily operational mechanism. If they're looking at how to meet their sales goals, they're backing into the funnel almost every single time. They're doing reverse funnel analysis. But Seth Vinder's point about the iterative nature, how you bring people back to the top of the funnel for consideration of other elements, that's really the key element, because the funnel's not a single flow process anymore. So I'll leave that aside, just echoing Seth Vinder. I'm on team funnel there with you. Thank you very much. The other part of that is there's really two elements I'd point to your question, Dave. One I mentioned a bit earlier with my discussion about the acronym CASE. So sorry to go back to that, but when people have asked me over the years what I think success in marketing looks like, I've gone back to this over and over again. So whoever wrote this in an article eons ago, thank you. So if you remember, it was creativity, analytics, storytelling, and experience. So the S was storytelling. And awfully, that's solely aligned with the concept of messaging to prospect or constituents, right? So selling to them, giving a conversation that they're going to tie into their need satisfaction selling. But in my time in marketing, it was also messaging to stakeholders and leadership, especially, and I think a lot of people on this call have this, how you talk to the C-suite. And you're talking about your strategy and what your spend is. And one of our efforts around that was looking at where our products aligned. So it was either cross-selling opportunities for insurers or next best offer for agents. And we had a lot of products. So your mobile home, travel trailer, motorhome, motorcycle, snowmobile, off-road vehicle, family boat, personal watercraft, a lot of stuff in there. So what we explored was a concept we read on this called fuzzy clustering. So none of us knew about this. So we went to our data scientist, and she produced models using what she called, ready, orthogonal transformation, which didn't clear it up for us at all. So then we had to align our marketing strategies and, of course, explain to leadership what orthogonal transformation was and how that aligned with what we were going to actually do. That's when I learned, back to the S, that some of the best data scientists and marketers were the ones who could effectively tell the story about our plan. So when we were prepping for this management call with the C-suite, we sat down with our data scientists, and I learned that the process she used, right, clustering and orthogonal transformation, was really like looking at events in a decathlon. That's how she explained them. So sure, there's 10 different events, but when you separated the ones that were discrete from the running, you could look at the ones where running was part of the process. So for example, you had lots of running events, but for example, a high jump also had running in it, and then some didn't. And then you look at how those were aligned. So storytelling aligned the analytics with the strategy and allowed us to really connect with the C-suite on what we wanted to do with that process. The second is really understanding what's important to your audience. So that may really seem obvious to the process, but I think a lot of marketers, and I certainly did this early in my career, focus exclusively on the creative aspect of the collateral. I mean, that's the fun part, right? You build something pretty and amazing and engaging and driving, and you miss the financial results. And that really is where the buy-in is when you think about the analytics around this and the storytelling. So when we first developed our campaign for vacant property insurance, we were designing the product. We had a great tagline. Design elements were beautiful, but we learned we had to focus on how we would control our growth. That was a concern of senior leadership, and what the loss results were and how likely they were going to be and how we would monitor those. And then as we monitored them, what was the process in place using dashboards to augment the campaign and make changes? So we had to deploy the depth of analytics that was necessary to maintain long-term profitability and keep the confidence and continued investment of the C-suite in our process.
Wow.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I'd like to remind everyone joining us today to send us your questions by using the Q&A tab in the player.
Customize your data experience. BestLink now offers an interactive company dashboard that provides company-level intelligence in a fast, user-friendly interface featuring interactive tables, charts, and Sparkline performance histories. Customize the dashboard tiles to prioritize the insurer ratings, data, and analytics that best support your workflow. AM Best. Our insight, your advantage.
Savinder, how can AI-driven data analytics enhance personalization in insurance marketing, and what are some of the ethical considerations to consider?
Let's start with ethical considerations.
Yeah, we'll let Jeff handle the unethical consideration.
But I would love to hear your point of view here as well, Jeff. I think the most important, and there's so many discussions and topics about it, and I would share this, right? I did practice, or we did a lot of experiments using artificial intelligence models, propensity models, and things we could be doing. It was a great lesson for me, or learnings that I achieved out of it. I had to go back, and I actually took some MIT courses to understand what that was enlightening. And if anyone is interested, I highly recommend doing that continuing education course. But it was enlightening for me because it actually put me in context, like what ethical really means. Like everybody may have different definition. And the stage where we are right now, I think it's transparency and fairness. That's most critical in my view. And how you could do that is just by informing your consumers that you have like what they are seeing and what to expect out of that journey. So I can use an example of digital, right? And also some of the from things that I'm seeing from personal life, from digital consumer journey perspective. In insurance, it's complex for anyone to go and buy insurance, right? Sometimes you may not even get the right product if you're just not talking to someone. But we know that as if the coming generations do want to buy things online. or digitally, and they trust that more. But I do feel if you upfront inform your consumer what to expect of the journey and at what point they should be considering talking to someone, and that someone is actually maybe a chatbot, and at what point it should switch to an actual human to inform you or help you make the right decision. I think that transparency is important, giving them a fair chance to the consumer to make the right decision based on the right data. I think that's important. I do feel that's where we should be most concerned about right now. And then AI-driven data analytics strategies, especially for personalization, I think there is a huge opportunity there. Some of my favorite models that I have used and seen effectiveness are lookalike modeling. And, sounds fancy term. Not every company, every insurance company has machine learning engineers who can spin up a model and say, here, go use it. Even if you have those resources, they are more focused on actuarial and predictive analytics for pricing and all that stuff. But I would use a live example on what I'm doing right now because I don't have those resources for one of the companies I'm working with. Is I just said, we have data from our past 2 years of folks who have bought insurance from us, right? They have affinity for this brand and this product. So let's just get that spreadsheet. We have all the demographic data. We have plenty of plethora of data. Let's see some trends that we can derive out of it. Let's use a data analytics person who can just look at visually what we are seeing using some pivot charts and whatnot. If you don't have a predictive analytics person, of course, you go that route. But that's a great use, right? And then you could create some trends that can give you new segments, or new things you could experiment and see what else we can do with it. And if you can actually create a lookalike model or audience out of it, that's even better. But the strategies are huge. And from personal life, I do feel I go back to the ethical thing. Like my son really argues sometime over things with us, which he learned from ChatGPT. And I'm like, I can vouch that this is wrong.
Right.
Like you cannot just trust everything that ChatGPT is telling you. So I think it's more of looking at AI or say Gen AI even in more assisting methodology versus this is all I have. And that's where I think people need to be more educated and informed. And that's all part of ethical use of AI.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jeff, any thoughts to share on that?
So the first thing I would do is echo what Satvinder said about authenticity and transparency. I spent a lot of my career working with independent agents. We had a huge base of independent agents, and they are your first line of offense and defense when you're working with policyholders and prospects. Equipping them with the right amount of information about the investigative techniques that you use, the technology you use to help them do their business better is incredibly important because they're the ones who are getting the questions. They're the front line. So I'd say transparency is incredibly important. The other part, and unfortunately, I had to do some research on this because I'm not as deeply into it as Satvinder is. I did discover that there are ways to use either differential privacy or federated learning to preserve anonymity. Now, those are more sophisticated AI models. Satvinder mentioned if you don't have somebody in your staff that does that, you probably don't have access to those types of learnings and those models. But I would say over time, if you're an insurer that's going to be in this space, if you're going to embrace AI, you probably better get on board having those people on your team and building that out.
Definitely, absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. So, staying on that theme, Jeff, of leveraging data, specifically social media, using social media to understand customer needs and preferences, how might that then tie back to the development of personalized products and services?
So let me start off with first the tools that you need or the tools that are available to make sure that companies are really thinking about that space. So using the right listing tools is incredibly important, or even taking advantage of the analytics platforms that are already out there. So from a tool standpoint, Google it to death if you want to. Hootsuite, Brandwatch, Sprinkler. I'm not advocating any of those, but if you do any sort of research at all, or Satvinder, if you ask your child to use ChatGPT, they'll come up with the same names of companies. That can help monitor mentions of the brand and really concerns or complaints that are tied to the brand. Or even when you think about the market at large, that really get you into opportunities. If you're not using one of those vendors, really Meta has a ton of stuff on their platform already, right? There's a lot of tools there. There's audience insights environments. There's a lot of things that you can use that can really help you refine and define your market. The next step is to use your internal analysis to review those insights to see, back to your question, Dave, what products your customer base might need. So there's some obviously publicly shared events. You probably already have these products like a birth, a marriage, a new home. That's really traditional cross-selling. Then you think about other things that people post or share, like travel, posts about pets, retirement. That might lead to product introductions like travel insurance, pet insurance, or even insurance that supports the gig economy. So even beyond creating new products, there's simply monitoring channels to see which social outlet your customers are using and then tailor your communication plan along those lines. So monitoring is a big piece. But then taking one more step into Sat Vendor's realm, again, she probably knows way more about this than me. I've read about the use, and I don't have any experience in this area, of AI tools like IBM Watson and Azure AI to really understand not just the data flowing through, but the customer sentiment that they're putting out there in terms of tweets or posts that could be tied to insights about how to either improve your claim service or, really for a marketer, positive feedback that reflects back on how you're going to develop your marketing campaigns.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned those events. So I was helping a colleague out. She lives in the LA area. Unfortunately, we all are thinking of them in the thoughts and prayers, hope they can come through it and that they finally get under control. But so I got talking to her husband, and he was telling me he had been contacted by close to a dozen law firms. And I said, how did they happen to contact you? Was it, geography, because you're not living in your house? Everyone had to vacate. Social media, people that posted like, we're okay, don't worry about us. And then obviously the law firms are using some data, and from there contacting these people, matching up with their cell phone numbers to say, hey, look, let us represent you. Of course, the part of me, they haven't even filed a claim yet, and already the lawyers are like, oh, you need to be ready to sue your insurance company. So that part of it kind of really bothers me a little. But it is interesting, that they were very in tune to that very point. So, but Savinder, how can insurance ensure transparency and explainability in AI-driven marketing to build trust with customers and comply with the coming evolving regulatory requirements?
Yeah, I think a part of that, right, like we were talking about the transparency and making sure you just inform that you are interacting. If say you have a chatbot built on your website or wherever, you just inform them what to expect, right? And how to actually make it effective is, and this sentence that I'm going to make is so, I think it's effective in leveraging and useful, is a computer, human beings are not part of a computer's story. Computers are part of a human story. I think I'm seeing that and I'm just not specific to insurance, but generally in marketing, we are kind of forgetting that. We are delegating too much to our Gen AI and artificial intelligence. And I'm not opposed to AI. I think there's huge power there, but I do feel that there needs to be a checkpoint, specifically in the insurance world, where someone is verifying that at what point this needs to go to a human interaction. Claims, and Jeff, I love that analogy you used on the claims, on sentiment analysis, right? There is a huge opportunity there where somebody's picked, say their house is on fire. I'm just, worse analogy, but going to the LA story right now. But if somebody is calling an insurance company during that time, there is a stress in the voice, right? The AI can actually read that stress, and then based on that could craft that this should not be a chatbot handling the answer right now. It needs to go to a human being. I mean, that's the kind of thing that needs to start occurring. And I do feel, and this is a little, I would say, controversial, which is I do feel that we are more focused on managing our expense ratios and when we are introducing these methodologies, but I think we need to shift, or I would say focus more on consumer experience and build tactics or introduce AI in those forums, right? And I think that would be a huge shift. But right now, the focus is so much on where we can actually save more dollars by introducing something which is an automation. I also feel like reg requirements, I think you just need to have a structure in place. And I know a lot of companies, I can't remember where I read this, but it said it's only 27% of the companies who are ready to adopt AI, but more than 70% right now they still hesitate.
Wow.
But if you have the right structure, you have the right data governance teams and your compliance teams, your legal teams playing with you, partnering with you, you can trust them. And they will make sure you do the right thing from a marketing perspective. But if you do things just on your own, it could be problematic.
Well, good advice. Jeff, by the way, speaking of chatbot, I can't wait till they invent a Jeff Bear chatbot someday. That would be the ultimate customer experience, we know. Jeff, any additional thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, I just think the Jeff Bear chatbot, the first question is, would you like to be disappointed, yes or no? And we just go from there and make that a decision tree. So let me first echo what Sat Vendor said once again, and we've both talked about this, the transparency, incredibly important in this space. The second thing that she said that I thought was really resonant was, and this is true about marketing as a whole, right? You have to build a team of people that best allow you to deploy what your strategy is in that space. If you're going to jump in with both feet into AI, you're going to need your legal team involved. You're going to need your data analytics team involved. You're going to need your second legal team involved. I mean, this is what's going to happen to you as you move into this space. But I think we've all seen, to a degree, what that can do in terms of helping you. I love the example that Seth Vendor mentioned about listening to the stress in someone's voice and determining whether you're going to flow directly through to an adjuster or put them through to a form fill. But by that same token, you can listen to the expediency in their voice. And I think we all have this. I remember talking about this at a conference. I said, how many people in the audience would stay on the line to talk to somebody to order something versus just pressing a button to go straight through on Amazon? And like nobody had their hand up. Everyone's like, just put me straight through. So there's that straight through part of this too, about expediency, figuring out what's urgent versus what's important and moving through that line. But along with that, I would add, because Dave and Lori and Sat Vendor, I don't know our audience constituency today. I don't know the makeup, but there is a great piece that was put out, if you're an agent, by the Big I. It's an AI marketing toolkit, and you really should give that a read. I'm not promoting them unnecessarily. I read through it myself. Great overviews and ideas really on SEO, tools that you can use in AI, marketing and sales tips, but also the piece I really liked was around the ethical standards. There were really rules and guidance there to help govern you. And especially if you're an independent agent, you don't have the resources of a large company. You can't just decide to deploy $10 million to your AI governance effort overnight. You're going to deploy somebody in your shop to watch what you're doing. And having those basic standards in place are incredibly important. So I'm glad Sat Vendor mentioned that.
Yep.
Yeah, great point.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our time. But before we conclude, I'd like to ask both of our guests one final question. Looking ahead, what emerging trends in data and data analytics do you think will have the most significant impact on insurance marketing strategies in the next 5 years? Sat Vendor, your thoughts on that?
I think personally, I think consumer behavior is most important because it's ever changing. You have to serve different demographics of audience who still buy, or as you say, I'm just going to use nurse practitioners who are just graduating recently. Like, they don't want to interact with anyone. They just want to go buy online, including an insurance policy. But just understanding where they would like to buy, where should we find them? Is TikTok the right place to start selling insurance policies? That is so important to understand. And I do feel that that's a groundbreaking place where there's not much of AI-based understanding, and data exists, but some models that actually keep informing, and you can keep changing your marketing strategies to reflect that. That's important. Or some things are available, but they are just so expensive. I would also recommend, again, Jeff, to your point, I don't know the makeup of the audience here, but if you are moving forward, I think it's time to start thinking about innovative or creative ways on how we can get the first-party data in, because of the world we are entering, right? And I think the privacy rules of people expecting do not contact me and all that stuff, that's going to go away. I mean, I like to know on Instagram that I expect I work out, I expect my legging aid company to remind me you wanted to buy this, and because I forget sometimes, whatever it is, right? But you get the idea. The idea of the reliance on AI in a more calculative way, I think that's important, and people need to be prepared on big, large, small, how I can use it. Otherwise, I might lose the competitive edge.
Absolutely. And Jeff, what are your views on what emerging trends you see over the next 5 years?
Well, from a lot of conferences I've been in, I always hear, well, that's a really good question. I have to admit, this is a really good question. I think the increased use of chatbots is logical for sure, right? As AI increases in efficacy and decreases in errors and hallucinations, it's going to become a more trusted source for both insurers and insurance. From a marketing standpoint, I think machine learning can certainly assist in lead scoring, especially as it ties into, and Satvinder and I both mentioned this, customer lifetime value. An output of machine learning is also the ability to enhance, and we did a lot of work at this at Foremost, on segmentation analysis. So think about just one example. You could look at, not an area I was involved in a lot, but small businesses, and they have specific needs, or you can create campaigns that target niches they're in or regions or industries. And then if you work long enough for a company, you become sort of a junior everything, a junior claims person, a junior legal counsel, junior product analyst. So to my product people, so not really on the marketing front, but as you call this data, using AI could result in the ability to create a much more dynamic pricing model or provide, let's say, risk assessment perspectives in real time.
Absolutely. Satvinder and Jeff, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It was great. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. I'd like to also thank our viewers who joined us for this discussion, and I'd also love to thank my co-host Dave for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Always my pleasure. I learned a lot, that's for sure.
I did also. We'll have this interview posted in the IMCA and AM Best video libraries, and we'll also have a transcript available shortly. We'll also be reporting this in Best Review, AM Best TV, and our other text and multimedia channels, as well as providing this content to IMCA for their distribution. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Looking to get the full attention of the insurance industry? We have the platforms that will do just that. Whether it be AM Best TV, AM Best Audio, Best Review Magazine, or Best Day. Find out more by calling AM Best Advertising Sales at 908-439-2200, extension 5399, and have a great day.